Okay, wait, this first card changes the entire tone of this reading. The Six of Cups reversed. Symbolically, this is not giving me some sweet story about nostalgia. It feels like somebody realizing that an old emotional blueprint no longer works because you accidentally showed them what something real feels like. And the wild part is, you probably have no idea which moment did it. Hey, beautiful. Soul? Welcome back to Tina Sacred Flame. If you are new here, subscribe and like the video if this resonates. As always, take what connects and leave the rest. Now stay with me, because this is where it gets interesting. You did not affect this person by performing. You did not carefully choose the right words. You did not become softer, louder, quieter, easier, or more impressive. You were simply caught in a moment where you forgot to manage yourself. And somehow, that was the moment that got them. Maybe you laughed before checking whether it was too loud. Maybe you admitted something honest, and wondered why you said it. Maybe you looked at them with that expression you make when you are actually listening instead of waiting for your turn. Whatever it was small to you. To them, it was disruptive, because this person is used to familiarity without intimacy. They recognize patterns quickly. They know how people flirt, impress, angle for approval, and reveal only the parts that will land well. You did something different. You made them feel safe and exposed, and that contradiction has been living in them. The reverse Six of Cups as a psychological symbol can point to outgrowing old emotional patterns and realizing that what once felt normal may have been incomplete. That is what your presence represents here. You did not just give them a strong feeling. You made them compare that feeling to everything that came before you. That is why this is bigger than attraction. There is now a before you version of their emotional life, and an after you version. And the strangest part? You may have walked away worrying that you were awkward, too open, too quiet, too intense, or that you should have said less. Meanwhile, they were trying to understand why one moment with you felt more alive than experiences they had spent years calling important. And the next card is going to show us what they cannot stop replaying. The Empress. Okay, this makes so much sense, because what they are replaying is not necessarily something you said. It is the way you were being. The Empress, symbolically, is someone who is not constantly checking whether they are allowed to exist exactly as they are. There is a naturalness here, a kind of ease that does not need an audience. And I think they caught you in that energy for just a second. Maybe you were talking about something you genuinely love and your whole expression changed. Maybe you laughed and did not immediately pull yourself back together. Maybe they told you something, and instead of giving them the response they expected, you actually listened. No performance, no calculation, just presence. For some of you, it may have been even smaller than that. You fixed your hair without thinking. You got distracted by something funny. You admitted you did not know something instead of pretending you did. You became excited about some random little detail that probably felt completely irrelevant afterward. But they noticed, and what they noticed was that you seemed alive inside yourself. That is the part they keep replaying, because people can manufacture confidence, they can manufacture mystery, they can learn how to flirt. They can become very good at creating an impression, but this did not feel created. It felt like they accidentally saw you before you remembered anyone was watching. And beautiful soul, that can hit somebody in a very different place. Especially when we put this beside that reversed Six of Cups. Their old emotional blueprint may have taught them that attraction comes with tension, that intensity comes from uncertainty, that you have to chase something, prove something, decode somebody, and then there was you, doing almost nothing, yet somehow making them feel more. That is why their mind keeps returning to the moment. They are trying to locate the mechanism. Was it your face? Your voice? The thing you said? The way you looked at them? But I do not think they can isolate it, because the impact was not coming from one technique. It was the absence of technique. You may barely remember this interaction because, to you, there was nothing remarkable about being yourself for 30 seconds. To them, those 30 seconds exposed the difference between being impressed by someone and actually feeling something in their presence. And that difference is bothering them. Because the more they replay you, the more they realise they were not only fascinated by what they saw in you, they liked what happened to them around you. They became more present, more open, maybe even more honest with themselves than they intended to be. And that is where this reading starts going somewhere much deeper. Because you did not only show them something about you, you accidentally introduced them to a version of themselves they may not have realised was still in there. And now we have the Five of Wands reversed. That is interesting. Because this does not feel like somebody becoming more excited by conflict. It feels like the opposite. They became less interested in needing conflict in order to feel something. And that may be the part they did not expect. Symbolically, the Five of Wands reversed can point to stepping out of unnecessary friction, not needing to compete, not needing to prove, not needing every emotional experience to come with some kind of struggle attached to it, and I think being around you gave them a glimpse of that. You may have made them feel desire, without making them feel like they had to earn your attention. You may have made them feel curious without making them anxious. You may have made them feel exposed without making them feel attacked. That combination is unusual for them, because this person may be more familiar with attraction that gives them a job. Chase this person, figure them out, say the right thing, win them over, fix something, prove something. Stay interesting enough that the connection does not disappear. There is always something to manage. But with you, for a moment there was nothing to manage, and strangely that made the feeling stronger. That is the part they were not prepared for. Because when somebody has spent enough time associating chemistry with tension, peace can initially feel almost suspicious. They may think, wait, why does this feel intense when nothing bad is happening? Why am I this interested when I am not confused? Why do I feel so awake when nobody is making me compete for anything? And beautiful soul, that question can rearrange a lot inside somebody, because now they are not only thinking about you. They are noticing themselves. They are noticing how much energy they usually spend protecting, performing, anticipating, decoding, and how little of that seemed necessary around you. Maybe they talked more freely than they normally do. Maybe they forgot to be impressive. Maybe they said something personal and only realised afterward how easily it came out. Maybe they were simply quieter around you, but it was a quiet that felt full instead of awkward. You may not have seen anything dramatic happen. Meanwhile, something in them was unclenching. That is what I keep getting here. The Empress showed us why they noticed you. The Five of Wands reversed is showing us why they noticed themselves. For those few moments, they were not chasing a feeling. They were inside one. And now they know something they did not know before. They know they are still capable of being that open, that present, that affected. And once you discover that part of yourself is still alive, going back to emotional autopilot becomes a lot harder. And now we have the Queen of Swords reversed. Okay, there it is. Because once this person realised they were affected, I think their mind immediately tried to take over. The Queen of Swords reversed, symbolically, can point to perception becoming distorted when somebody is trying too hard to protect themselves. Thinking instead of feeling. Analysing instead of experiencing. Trying to find the flaw in something simply because accepting it would make them vulnerable. And that may be exactly what happened here. You gave them an experience that felt natural. Their response afterward may have been anything but natural. They may have suddenly become quieter, more controlled. Maybe their replies became shorter. Maybe they looked away when the moment became a little too real. Maybe they changed the subject, acted strangely casual, or behaved as though nothing significant had happened, and you could have read that as disinterest. But symbolically, this looks more like somebody attempting to reduce the emotional volume, because they could not explain why it was so loud inside them. That is different. This person knows how to understand attraction when there is an obvious reason for it. They can say, okay, I am interested because this person is attractive, because they are mysterious, because they are unavailable, because I want their approval. Those explanations give the mind somewhere to stand. But you did not give them much to explain. You were just you, and somehow that was worse for their defences. because what are they supposed to argue with? They cannot tell themselves you deliberately seduced them when you were not trying. They cannot blame the intensity on some elaborate game, if there was no game happening. So they may be doing something very human, trying to convince themselves it was ordinary. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe I was just in a certain mood. Maybe there was nothing special about that conversation. Maybe they are like that with everyone. And then their mind goes right back to the details, the exact thing you said, the expression on your face. The pause before you answered, the way they felt afterward. That is what makes this so frustrating for them. Every attempt to make the moment smaller requires them to examine it again, and every time they examine it, they remember why it affected them. You may have even noticed them becoming more observant instead of more expressive, watching you, listening more closely, trying to figure out whether what happened was accidental or whether there is simply something about you they cannot categorize. And beautiful soul, I think there is another layer here. Because the thing they are studying so intensely about you may not be the polished part. It may actually be something you have spent years trying to soften, hide, correct, or apologize for. And that is where the next card gets very interesting. And now we have the Seven of Pentacles. Okay, this is subtle. Because this card is making me think the thing they noticed was not how hard you were trying, it was how little you seemed to need an immediate result. Symbolically, the Seven of Pentacles can point to patience, discernment, someone who is willing to let something reveal itself instead of forcing it, and I think that quality in you affected them more than you realize. You may have thought you came across as quiet, they experienced you as grounded. You may have thought you were being awkward because you did not rush to fill every silence. They experienced someone who was comfortable enough not to perform. You may have worried that you seemed too serious when they were speaking. Meanwhile, they felt listened to in a way they are not used to. For some of you, it is your boundaries. You did not chase the conversation when it naturally paused. You did not immediately offer more of yourself just to keep their attention. You did not scramble to make sure they liked you. And maybe you have judged yourself for that before. Maybe somebody has called you distant, too intense, too selective, too slow to open. Maybe you have wondered whether you should be more charming, more available, more obviously interested. But to this person, something about your restraint made the interaction feel more honest, because they did not feel you reaching through the moment trying to extract a reaction from them. You were not secretly asking, do you approve of me? Do you want me? Am I doing this right? You were just participating in what was actually happening, and that gave them space to participate too. That is why this card matters. The Seven of Pentacles is not flashy energy. It does not rush. It pays attention. And there may be something about the way you pay attention that makes people feel more visible than you understand. Your face may give you away. Your curiosity may be unusually genuine. Your humour may come out at strange moments. You may ask a question because you actually want the answer, not because you are trying to sound interesting. You might think those things make you less polished, but they make you believable. And this person felt that. They felt the difference between someone presenting themselves and someone actually being there. Now here is where it gets uncomfortable for them, because after an interaction like that, they start noticing the absence of it elsewhere. Things that once felt exciting may suddenly feel rehearsed. Conversations they once enjoyed may feel strangely thin. Attention that used to flatter them may not reach the same place anymore. Not because everybody else suddenly changed, because their point of comparison did. And now we have the star reversed. Okay, this explains why that comparison is becoming uncomfortable, because the star reversed, symbolically, can point to realizing that something you once idealized does not actually nourish you the way you thought it did. And I think that is happening here. This person may be looking at certain connections differently now. Not because those people suddenly became wrong, not because their past was fake, but because something about you showed them a distinction they had not been making before. There is a difference between being wanted and being understood. There is a difference between chemistry and emotional presence. There is a difference between somebody keeping you interested because you never quite know where you stand, and somebody making you feel more like yourself. And before you, those differences may not have mattered very much. They could call something exciting because it kept them guessing. They could call something meaningful because it lasted a long time. They could call something intense because there was conflict, longing, distance, or uncertainty. But remember that reversed Six of Cups. Familiar does not always mean fulfilling, and you became evidence of that. You did not beat anybody in some invisible competition. You changed what this person is measuring. That is completely different. Now they may find themselves in a perfectly pleasant conversation and notice they are not really there. Someone may be giving them attention, saying all the right things, looking good on paper, and something inside them stays quiet, because now there is another question running underneath everything. How alive do I feel here? How much of myself am I actually bringing into this? Do I feel like I am connecting with somebody, or am I just repeating something I already know how to do? That is a difficult awareness to undo. And you may have seen the beginning of this without realizing what you were seeing. Maybe there was a moment when this person suddenly stopped multitasking and gave you their full attention. Maybe they watched you a little longer than the conversation required. Maybe there was a pause where neither of you said anything, and instead of rushing away from it, they stayed. You may have thought nothing of it. Meanwhile, something in them was registering the difference. And the star reverse tells me they may not feel entirely comfortable with what that difference reveals. Because once your standards change internally, certain truths become difficult to ignore. So now we get to the question that really matters. If this affected them enough to change the way they experience other connections, why have they not necessarily told you? What would admitting it force them to admit about everything else? And now we have the Queen of Pentacles. Okay, this makes the answer much more real, because the Queen of Pentacles is not asking what somebody can imagine, she is asking what they can actually live with. Symbolically, this card can point to what feels solid, valuable, sustainable, what belongs in your real life, instead of only existing safely inside your head, and that may be exactly why this person has hesitated. Because admitting what happened with you would make it real. Not dramatic, real. And real feelings have consequences. If they admit that one interaction with you reached them more deeply than connections they have known for much longer, then they may also have to admit that they have accepted less emotional depth than they actually wanted. They may have to question choices they once felt completely certain about. They may have to acknowledge that being composed is not the same thing as being unaffected. And maybe hardest of all, they would have to accept that you matter enough for your response to matter too. Because what if they misunderstood you? What if that moment was profound for them and completely ordinary for you? What if you were simply being yourself, exactly as we have been saying, and there was no hidden message for them to decode? That is where this gets complicated. This person may be very comfortable reading signals when people are trying to send signals. Flirting has a pattern. Chasing has a pattern. Wanting approval has a pattern. But authenticity? That is harder to read, because you may not have been trying to get anything from them. So now they cannot tell whether your warmth meant attraction or whether you are simply warm. Whether your attention meant something specific or whether that is simply how deeply you listen. Whether the connection was mutual or whether they were the one who suddenly opened. And that uncertainty creates two completely opposite impulses. Part of them wants another moment with you, just one more, another conversation, another chance to see whether that feeling appears again, because if it does, then they will know the first time was not something they invented. But that is also exactly what makes another moment frightening, because confirmation removes the escape route. Then they cannot keep calling it random. They cannot keep reducing it to timing or mood. They would have to decide what this means in the reality of their life. And beautiful soul, I think there is something even deeper underneath that. They are not only craving you. They are craving who they were when they were with you, that openness, that presence, that strange combination of calm and intensity. And the problem now is that their mind is beginning to connect that feeling so closely with you that separating the two is becoming almost impossible. And now we have the Three of Cups. Okay, this is important, because this card is changing what I think intense actually meant for this person. It may not have felt intense because everything was dramatic. It may have felt intense because, for once, nothing had to be. The Three of Cups, symbolically, can point to emotional openness, shared presence, ease, enjoyment, and the feeling of being able to exist around somebody without constantly monitoring yourself. And that may have been what overwhelmed them. They felt awake, but not anxious. They felt exposed, but not immediately unsafe. They felt drawn to you. But they did not feel like they had to become somebody else to keep your attention. Do you see how unusual that combination can be for someone? Because their old emotional blueprint may have taught them that intensity has to hurt a little. That chemistry has to involve uncertainty. That desire has to come with some kind of tension they need to solve. But around you, there may have been this completely different experience. Intensity without chaos. Comfort without boredom. Desire without performance. And that can go very deep. Maybe time felt strangely focused when they were around you. Not like some dramatic movie scene. More like everything else became less important for a minute. They noticed your expressions. They remembered little things you said. They became unusually aware of their own reactions. Maybe afterward they felt calmer than expected, or energized. Or they caught themselves smiling about something that would have seemed insignificant to anybody else. And I think that is why they keep returning to it. Because what happened did not fit their old definition of attraction. This was not just, I want this person. It was more like, I like myself here. I recognize myself here. Something in me feels available here that normally stays guarded. That is a much more complicated feeling. And when we put this Three of Cups beside everything we have already seen, the reverse Six of Cups, the Empress, that Five of Wands reversed, it becomes very clear why the experience stayed with them. You interrupted an old pattern without confronting it. You did not tell them they were emotionally guarded. You did not ask them to change. You did not force vulnerability out of them. You simply created enough emotional space for a different version of them to show up. And they felt that version. More relaxed, more present, more honest, maybe even more playful than they normally allow themselves to be. So when they think they are missing you, part of what they may actually be missing is that person they briefly became around you. And here is the part that really gets them. You may have done all of this without realizing you were doing anything at all. Which means, from their perspective, this may not be some special effect you turned on for them. This may simply be what happens when you are fully yourself. And if that is true, you could walk away from this having no idea that they are still trying to understand what you woke up inside them. And now we have the Five of Pentacles. Okay, this is actually the card I wanted to see here, because symbolically the Five of Pentacles can point to the fear of not being chosen, not being enough, or somehow standing outside of something you want to belong to. And I think this card is shifting the reading back to you. Because you may have walked away from this interaction wondering what you did wrong. Maybe you thought you were too quiet, too awkward, too intense, too honest. Maybe you replayed your own behaviour and started editing yourself afterward. I should have said that differently. I should have been more confident. I should have made it clearer that I was interested. I should have been less obvious. And beautiful soul, that is exactly where you can miss the entire point. The thing that affected this person was not the perfected version of you. It was the version that appeared before you started correcting yourself. So please notice the paradox here. The more you try to reproduce what happened, the further you move away from what created it. Because then you are performing. Then you are watching yourself. Then you are trying to control the outcome. And that was never where the power was. You were powerful because you were present. That does not mean this person is guaranteed to confess something. It does not mean there has to be a relationship. It does not mean every intense feeling automatically becomes a future. That is not what these cards are saying. What they are showing symbolically is that something emotionally genuine happened because neither person could fully manufacture it. And that matters on its own. So if you have been standing emotionally outside the door, wondering whether you need to become more attractive, more mysterious, more available, more impressive, I do not think that is the lesson here. The lesson is almost the opposite. You do not need to chase the version of yourself they responded to. You already were that person, probably when you were least aware of it, and maybe that is why this reading feels so specific. You thought the imperfect moment weakened your impact. They experienced it as proof that you were real. Now, what happens from here belongs to reality. Timing matters. Choices matter. Both people matter. But there is one question still sitting underneath all of this. Because if fear disappeared for a moment, if neither of you had to interpret, protect, impress, or predict anything, what would this person actually want to experience with you again? Not what would they say, not what would they promise, what moment would they want back? Because I think the final card is going to tell us exactly that. And the final card is Death Reversed. Okay, that says a lot, because symbolically, Death Reversed is not about some dramatic ending. It can point to resisting change, because part of you already knows that once something changes internally, you cannot completely go back to the person you were before. And I think that is what this person wants from you. Not some huge declaration, not a perfect romantic scene. They want another moment where they stop resisting what happens inside them. Another conversation that starts ordinary and suddenly becomes honest. Another moment where they look at you and forget what they were supposed to say. Another chance to hear you laugh without wondering whether you know what it does to them. Maybe they simply want enough time around you to find out whether that feeling happens again, because that is the question underneath everything. Was it one extraordinary moment? Or did your presence reveal something they could actually experience again? Death Reversed makes me think they are caught between wanting that answer and knowing the answer could change something. Because remember where we started. The Six of Cups reversed, an old emotional blueprint no longer working the same way. Then the Empress showed us you being completely natural. The Five of Wands reversed showed us how strange it felt for them to experience intensity without struggle, and every card after that kept returning to the same realization. You did not force anything open. Something opened because they stopped protecting it for a second. That is what they want back. Not necessarily performing the exact same behavior, not the same words, not the same setting. They want that absence of management. That moment where nobody is trying to control what the interaction means while it is happening. Because, as I do not think you gave this person some completely foreign emotional experience. I think you reminded them of something they had forgotten they could feel. Ease, curiosity, desire, presence, vulnerability without immediate danger, maybe even joy without having to earn it first. And beautiful soul, that is why this stayed with them. You became connected to the memory of themselves being emotionally awake. Whether anything develops from this is something reality has to answer. These cards cannot promise a confession. They cannot promise timing. They cannot promise a future. But symbolically, they are showing why the moment mattered, and maybe there is something here for you too. Because the version of yourself you keep thinking needs improvement may not be the version that reaches people most deeply. Sometimes it is the laugh you did not edit, the honesty you did not rehearse, the silence you did not rush to fill, the expression you forgot to hide. You thought you were simply being yourself, and maybe that was exactly why they felt something they could no longer explain away.